So we are here today for another instalment of our lunchtime lecture series sponsored by the Fleet Street Quarter Business Improvement District. And today our speaker is Dr. Yewande Okuleye, who is here to discuss poetic landscapes, language subjectivities and heart-centered conversations. Now, Yewande's relationship with the house goes back quite some time, quite a number of years, to when she was consulting on our educational output and workshop offerings around Francis Barber, who was a resident here in the house with Dr. Johnson and learned how to read and write in English, Latin, ancient Greek, probably European languages and other, here in this very room where we are today. And it is the centre of this room that sort of is the focus of Yewande's inspiration for today's poetic landscapes, which is language and relationships. Not to speak for you, but I know we've spoken at length about this. And we have on display here the facsimile of the first edition of Johnson's dictionary, which is an incredibly prescriptive and precise work and an absolute use and guide and tool as to how language was and should be used, as deigned by Johnson in this very room in the middle of the 18th century. But as we know, language can be constraining to a degree, and I think Yewande's talk will be talking about what lies between words and meaning and feeling and relationships, which is exciting. Yewande is the poet in residence of the Oxford Health Histories Project. Her background is incredibly varied, too varied to detail here, but encompasses a PhD in medicine, medical history, and arts, language and poetry, and a whole other things that I'm sure I'm overlooking. I'm sorry for the injustice I'm doing your career. So without further ado, if you could join me in welcoming Dr. Yewande.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here, and I'm so happy that you're joining me on this journey into what I'm calling poetic soundscapes. My inspiration for this work came thinking about how heart-centered conversations really should be. I didn't know, just have a guess how many conversations we have in our lifetime or how many conversations we have a year. We'll talk about that later. And when I just thought about it, that all the conversations I have, either to instruct, to inform, but the conversations, the difficult conversations about emotions are difficult to have. They're very clipped. And I found poetry allowed me to kind of construct those difficult conversations. And the first poems I wrote were for my mum and dad, because I've come from a culture where we didn't really, well, we were not very touchy-feely, let's just put it that way. And I wanted to say thank you to my mum and dad for what they'd done. And I just did a poem. One was about my name, the meaning of my name, which my name means our mother has returned. And I was named after my father's grandmother. So I thought, oh, that would be a nice thing to me, just to write a poem about my name and read it to my dad, because it's our whole history. And my dad was so moved. He just said, oh, thank you. I love the work you do. Because he doesn't really understand what I do. My dad's an accountant, and it's just like, he's just like, what? You know, he didn't really understand everything. And he said, I now get what you've been doing. And then the conversation with my mum was, I did something where I looked at epigenetics, and I could link, you know, my DNA to her DNA. And it was like, oh my God, you know, I'm a nurse and I now understand what you do. So it really brought us closer. And that was just, even though I'd done lots of studying, I found poetry was just so powerful to have those heart-centered conversations. So the beginning of this for me was, let me now see how I can use that in my work. How do I move away from writing structured essays, which I've been struggling to do all my life, to having another language? And that, how can that language be used for us in understanding everyday messiness of emotions? And Dr. Johnson's dictionary, as Celine has guided us, we do have language so that we all are on the same page most of the time, but sometimes there are things under language, things in between language. So as a starting point, I have put together a poem, but a poem where I use vocals and sound in a different way. And I'm going to play that. It's about 5 minutes. And another thing about language is how do we listen and what do we hear? And it's all really internal. How do we internalize that and how can we make meaning from that? So. Black dough, rise, rises. Black dough, rise from the surprise. Rise supine. Rise, languish, languish, horizontal, penetrating the soil to form roots to entangle with other roots. Slither and slide through the moist earth, in search of you, in search of me, in search of all of us, in search of eternity. Locked. Snapped for a while in frosty, cold, deep, dark, deep, frozen, dark, deep, dank, darkness. And then, gently, intentionally, rise. Rise upward. Push. Breathe. Push. Breathe. Push. Breathe. Proper breakthrough. Rise, black dough. Rise, black dough. Rise. Rise to the stars. Rise to the sky. Rise to feel high. Rise. Rise and shine bright. I wanted to just take a minute. I think that was 5 minutes, 15 seconds. We've got an extra minute to just think about, and I've got Poetic notes if anyone wants to make any notes about what words or what feeling came to mind, and then I'll just kind of spend a minute or two just talking about the context of it, if anyone wants to do that. So this workshop really is talk, but also a bit of participation, but it's really up to you. I'm going to go with how people feel. It's a bit, I'm going to say winging it, but that's not the word. It's kind of open, so it's not me just imposing what I have in my own head, what I want to happen. So if people want to take that, if not, it's free. I've got a few pens, which I thought of, I brought in case. Not enough to go round, but it's just in case you want to. Because at the end of this, if we have some time, I want us to take some inspiration, and I'll see if we can compose a quote or a poem together. So how did we feel? What popped into your mind? What popped into your heart? Sometimes the quicker we are, the less we have time for our minds to check. So we can keep that, and then we'll come back to that later, because we'll move. So the idea behind that sound piece, what really informed this was, I like the idea of Dr. Johnson, that this place was a workhouse, but also it was a home, and he provided homes for other people, and the relationship that they might have had. So the relationship that I looked at was Miss Anna Williams. So there's a portrait of her. I'm not sure which floor.
2 floors down.
2 floors down, a portrait of Anna Williams. And Anna Williams lived here the longest with Francis Barber. So they had a long, extended friendship. So friendship, companionship. She also was the housekeeper. So she was intrinsic to her relationship with Dr. Johnson. We might have more information about Boswell and some other, the elites, but I'm always interested in kind of the non-elites. That's most of my research, bottom up, upstairs, downstairs, that kind of thing. That actually what was the substance of their relationship, but also thinking about the state of mind. We all know about Dr. Johnson and his predisposition to nervousness, mental health issues. So that was my inroad about how would we talk about that kind of depression or mood. And that's what the Rise Black Doe was about. How does doe rise? That was my thinking towards that. I also have a poem. So once we've listened to that, I thought it'd be interesting for me to write a poem, and this is the first time I've read this poem. So I'm very pleased to launch this poem here. Time. Time. It's time. It's time to say goodbye. Please do not long cry. Open your eyes, do not close the door. Return to me. Return to me. Return to me, I implore. Ladybirds now swarm your bed. They say it's all in my head. burdened by the weight of my loss. No one really gives a toss, do they? Lilies, though, lilies in little jesters, they loom large, they loom. We lilies, we loom large till we become blue, then brown forlorn. Our petals crunch like crisp under your feet till you taste the salt in the air, silencing sound, silence. Medicine to help lose your care. Your tongue flips inside out, upside down, so much clout to speak out. Voices ring, voices ring, voices ring. Voices ring, lacerate, incarcerate, fascia blue, nowhere to hide, body alive. Kindness is medicine. I have not heard that smell for a while. If only. If only. If only, if only, if only, if only I had said, if only I had just said, if only I had said so much more. If only I had said so much more. If only I had said I love you when I look at the floor. I'm glad I could read that without crying, actually. Because after I had written that poem, because sometimes I've got a colleague here who is an academic, sometimes we can really separate the head from the heart. And the heart-centered conversations come to, after I'd written this poem, someone that I lived with about a quarter century ago died. And I had to now think about those times, and it kind of hit me more because this was thinking about relationship in a house, and I couldn't divorce myself from the poem that I wrote, and I had to change it a bit last night because I thought I don't want to cry. I'm a bit vain, I don't want to cry to be on tape, and even though with language there's some things we can omit to protect our vulnerability, and I did that in this poem in a way. So language itself is so complicated that even with a poem that I'd written, I had to remove myself a bit because there was a bit of death and loss that I had to confront. I just thought I would declare that also as part of this discussion, how trying to emote and touch with emotions it's difficult, really. I would now like us to try, and I've got another poem that I can read, but I want us to see if we can play around with taking a word and taking a concept and putting something together and write a poem together, you know. And I'll start with something here, very simple. Things around you are falling apart, being torn apart, frayed at the edges. And I'd like us to start at that as the beginning of our poem. And we could just take a word, and we've got the dictionary here to say, well, what do we want to add? What comes to your mind if you think things around you are falling apart? Being torn apart, frayed at the edges. So it's all about disintegration. Do we want to take a word, disintegrate? I'm going to turn for help for you to say, to get us going. So we've got like 7 minutes to do this in 7 minutes and do feedback. And I'm going to ask you to time. And it doesn't have to make real sense in a way. It doesn't have to be finished. But let's start with something.
Just some words, yeah.
Just a word from that. What comes to your mind? I just thought things falling apart, being torn apart, frayed at the edges. Let's just start with a word and then we can start compiling something.
The first word that came to my mind was depletion.
Depletion. I like that. Depletion. When I'm writing, I always like to have quite a few syllables that I can play with because I play with rhythm in a way. So depletion. Empty. Depleted, empty. I thought of devoid. I always like starting with something. Defeated, devoid. Let's get it dramatic.
Defeated.
Defeated.
Like a balloon.
I'm thinking of sort of lines like entropy or compost.
Entropy, compost. I like entropy.
Or what's that going on mushrooms?
We've got so many words now.
I like that. That's got a sense of renewal.
Yes.
Spores of memory emerging from the...
I am liking this now. Someone take notes. Please take notes because my pen's gone. My pen's gone. My pen's gone.
All this stress and emptiness.
All this stress and emptiness. With that, it just shows how we can collectively just put something together. Does anyone want to read this? To read it to us so we hear a different voice?
Things around you are falling apart, being torn apart, frayed at the edges, depleted, devoid, deflated like a balloon, looking for a home. All this stress and emptiness dissolved.
Spores of memory flee the entropy chambers of my heart to return to the place where we started. Rest. So we've just done an improvised poem in a way so that we can begin to explore what actually that means in a way. If there are any questions really, because I think I've been doing the talking and then I might share just another poem with you, but if there are any questions.
So when you do your poetry, you kind of make it in several dimensions by other sounds.
Yes.
Well, it's a big performance rather than just reading.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what I found with that was that there's a kind of hierarchy of what you take in. So you'll take in the sounds. The words are kind of down in that structure for me of experiencing it. And I just wondered, how you employ that when you compose things. Because I'm used to reading poetry on the page and having a very cerebral experience with it. Some of it might actually move me at times, but a lot of it is an intellectual thing. But yours is a sort of physical
yes.
character. Yeah.
Yes, that's what it's embodied.
Yeah. So that's, it's not a random thing because you've obviously got it through to me that I felt different levels in it.
Yes, and that's, I'm so happy.
Well, that's taken years to develop that, surely, or is it just a natural?
I think it's a combination of two. Because I started, I can be very cerebral, but the whole idea is to expand it so it comes back into to the body.
Yeah.
That's really, and I'm really glad that that's really, my work is done. My work is done. Yeah.
Yeah, that was very well phrased, actually.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm glad.
What I find interesting is I've always thought of Johnson's dictionary as a codification, which is what it's set out to do. When I look through it, I'm always looking for laughs because I look for his wit in it, that things that he describes, I've never thought of it that way, or the way he expresses it. So that is a very intellectual way of looking at dictionaries and words, isn't it? But you've looked at words in terms of them being feeling.
Yes, but it's expanding this, that we have the words, but there's some things that like the death of my friend that I can't, there's some things that words can never, ever.
You would be able to recall physical feelings.
Yes, and those physical feelings are normally trapped. We're not equipped, we're not taught how to now take those physical feelings and get them out there. They can be trapped in our bodies for so long, for generations. So this enables us to try and unpick and disentangle how we might feel about something. And it takes a while for us to even know how we're feeling, or if there's even a feeling there, or what that feeling is. So when my friend dying, is the feeling I had was guilt, that I didn't go and see him when he was ill. And it's like, well, actually, how do I translate that? So it's like, okay, now I'm going to be very aware that I can do something if someone is ill. Even if it's like, I could have sent flowers. Now I'm going to be very aware about how we take care of the sick. And that's going to be part of my work. That how do we take care of the sick? It's not just, we can't be there. I can't physically go and see him. I couldn't physically go and see him, but I could have sent flowers. Then I thought, oh my God, I can't remember his flowers. And that's how lilies came in. I had to think. And it was, oh my God, yeah, when Diana died, he was talking about the lilies, and lilies were his favorite flowers. But I'd forgotten about that. So thank you so much. So that really is what this is expanding on, our language. And I really feel we need we need that language so we can have those heart-centered conversations. Because it's part of our well-being. Yeah. You phrase that really well. I struggle to phrase what I do. I kind of tell people a whole page about what I'm doing. I started poetry. I've been writing poetry like, in the closet for a long time. I didn't call it poetry. I used to call them quotes. But I really started writing poetry when George Floyd died. Yeah, that's when, during the pandemic, I just thought I can't write I was invited to write opinion pieces, and people were asking me, and I thought, I can't contribute to this in prose. That's how it became something, yeah.
My wife's actually written quite a few wedding speeches for her friends. Who've struggled,
They're not poems, they're just rhymes, about their life and
so
things
she
like that.
always asks them for hints, about life's experiences, so she can put a poem together in a speech,
Just to read, they give me the information.
That's amazing.
And she's just,
But it's nothing like what, it's something.
but it's similar to what's going on now, isn't it? Start with a few words or whatever it is that you need to build a rhyming or a poem up,
Yeah, they're narratives in a way. They're these personal narratives. So I would call it a poem. I didn't wait for anyone to tell me I was writing poems before I just said. I think I first called them performance, and then my friend, who's a Shakespeare scholar, said, Yewande, this is poetry. this is poetry, and you're a poet, and I'm going to commission you to write a poem about Anne Hathaway. And I thought, oh, I am a poet then, okay. Yeah. So I think language also can limit us. It's like, I think what you do is quite personal and poetic for a wedding. Yeah.
Comfortable in this environment, but I like to, at my own leisure sort of thing, do things. But yes, enjoy it.
Beautiful. Using the power of language as a way to encapsulate a moment or a life.
Yeah.
That's right.
The emotion of it, rather.
Yeah. Quite memorable. Yeah. Quite. Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah. So, any more comments, questions, or I could.
We didn't really touch upon black dough in our responses.
Oh yes, I forgot. Thank you. Yes.
I thought it was myself. If I were to encapsulate it very briefly, it seemed like triumph in the face of adversity. So you've got something that needs certain conditions to grow. This dough, this black dough, and it's faced with all the adversity, this conditions, this frozen environment, the cold, the chill, and yet there is growth, there is breath. And that breathing seemed to me also the resting process that you have with dough. It's rest, it's calm before that transformation, that sort of metaphysical change to something new. And it seemed like renewal to a degree and a real triumph.
Yeah, thank you. But that's good. I think it's a cycle. That it's linking the gut, the heart. Gut, heart, I'm missing something else now. The gut, the heart, and the intellect. I think we separate them, but there's this cycle that there's this information that goes between all three. So even though you didn't talk about the emotion triggered you to reinterpret it and have a deeper meaning. And that's really what we do all the time. But this is, the soundscape gives us the space and time to be cognitive of what we're doing and which language we're drawing from. So it's all kind of more holistic in a way. Yeah. Yeah.
I guess what I wrote down was a little bit similar to what you'd mentioned about the bodily nature of it, but the sort of calm and meditative nature of the kind of invocation to rise and the sort of warmth of that sound, but also all of the sort of reverb made you think about the texture and spatiality of the sound, made you think of the room in which it was recorded, where it's being played, and then when you are kind of extending some of the syllables, again it made you sort of think about how the mouth and the body and your breath forms those sounds.
Thanks for today, for coming here today to speak to us, to inspire us, to really make us listen and think and most importantly perhaps feel. I wish to offer our commiserations in your recent loss. I'm sorry to hear that. And the kind of grief that was experienced in this house when Johnson lost his own wife, and the serious depression, introversion and questioning. I think that if only moment that you had is something that perhaps we can all feel and relate to when there is that loss. What could I have done differently? What should I have done differently? But as you beautifully said, it's that inspiration to what in the future can we and will we do differently? And I've just really enjoyed the play on words, the exploration of language, that collective poem that we've written that you beautifully read. As wonderful, in addition to the absolute joy of hearing you recite the new piece for us here in this room today. Very, very moving. Mm-hmm. Johnson himself knew the limitations of language. Over the near decade that he spent writing this dictionary, he was to conclude that, if I get this right, that words are the daughters of earth, whereas ideas are the sons of heaven. And while today there's a slight binary gender distinction that might be uncomfortable, the sentiment remains and is relatable, and I think is true. Words will only be ever secondary to what it is that we're trying to communicate with each other. So that heartfelt, heart-centered communication. I could go on, but I really feel that we should just congratulate and applaud Dr. Yewande.
Thank you sincerely for inviting me to showcase this here. It's so emotional for me. Dr. Johnson's house is one of my favourite museums in London, and I'm so glad that every one of you could join me to create this new poem and new way of just being. Thank you.
Thank you.